get your coffee. Joining me today will be Dr. Reeves. We're going to talk about the thyroid. Go get your coffee. We'll be right back.
"7,000 high school students drop out every school day. That's a line of desks more than 4 miles long. We can keep students in school. Visit boostup.org and take the first step."
Welcome to GHC Coffee Break. Joining me is Dr. Reeves, who I had not had the great pleasure of working with for a while, and now I get him twice this month. So hey, how lucky can I get, right?
You could probably be luckier.
Only if I win the lottery.
There you go. I've been working on that too. It's not working.
I know. I think I bought a few tickets during that last blast, but I'm still here, so I guess I didn't win, right?
I didn't even get a free ticket. I mean, it's one of those things that just too many odds against me.
Well, speaking of odds against us, with health, one of the things that earlier this month we talked about heart, and since I was so happy to get you for twice in 1 month, I'm going to utilize you the best I can. But also, besides Heart Month, is Thyroid Awareness Month.
Oh, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about thyroid then. Okay.
And I know probably not even a pinhead about the thyroid. I mean, I know what it is. I know the thyroid, but I don't know the thyroid.
Okay, well, let's talk about in Thyroid 101. Okay, that's where we'll start with. The thyroid is sort of a butterfly-shaped organ right here in your neck, all right? And I like to say that it's sort of the body's thermostat, because if the thyroid is working fine, everything else seems to be working fine. If it's not working quite as well, then stuff gets thrown off. It's part of the overall endocrine system, okay? The endocrine system is what sends out these chemical messengers to different parts of the body. Now, you say, well, gee, don't we have a neuronal system? The nerves send messages back and forth, right? Yeah, well, it does. And the nervous system sends electrical messages back and forth. We're electrical. But the thyroid and the endocrine system sends chemical messengers back and forth from one place to the other. Okay, so the thyroid is one of those organs that hopefully is working fine, and for the majority of people it is, but for some folks it doesn't put out as much of its hormones as it should, and for other folks it's hyperactive. It does too much. So we either hear people talk about, oh, I have a hypoactive thyroid, or I have a hyperactive thyroid. Okay? So what is a hypothyroid?
And that's the lower one.
That's the lower one. Okay. Hypo means lower. Okay?
That I remembered.
The thyroid puts out several different little hormones. There's something we call T3 and T4, and basically it's the thyroid hormone that is put out into the body that signals other parts of the body to do things. For example, if you have too little thyroid hormone, then you feel tired. Your metabolism slows, which means you gain weight, which then your heart will run slow, okay? And it can actually affect your skin and your hair, and people may lose some hair as a result of that. Skin may become different texture than what it has been. If you have a hyperactive thyroid, then your heart runs fast, your metabolism speeds up, you wind up then losing weight, and again, it changes your skin and your hair. So the thyroid then is sort of like your thermostat. If it's turned up too high, things run too fast. If it's turned down too low, things run too slow. Okay? So it affects the entire body. But there's a little bitty gland that affects the thyroid, and it's called the pituitary. The pituitary gland is sort of like the master gland, all right? It sits at the base of your brain, a little tiny thing, a little hangy-dandy thing right at the bottom of your brain, and blood flows around it. And as that blood flows around it, and it senses the amount of hormones from all the other glands. And if it says, you know what, you don't have enough thyroid hormone out there, then it then releases a hormone, something called thyroid stimulating hormone, that then comes out and it goes to the thyroid, and it's like putting your foot on the gas in the car. You know, it says, we need to do more. And so then the thyroid then usually cranks up and puts out more thyroid hormone. But if the thyroid's running too fast, then that thyroid stimulating hormone is lower because the pituitary says, whoa, we got to cut back here. So it cuts back on that thyroid stimulating hormone. So that leads us to a good way of testing how well your thyroid's doing. We can look at the thyroid hormone that's in your blood, and it may be fine. It may be right at the level we want it to be. Mm-hmm. And if that's the case, we look at the TSH. In most cases, we'll look at the TSH and the T3 and T4 at the same time. Because if the T3 and T4 are normal, but the TSH is high, then that tells me that the pituitary is having to really put the foot down on the gas to keep up this normal amount of hormone coming out of the thyroid. Okay. If the TSH is low and you still have a normal T3 and T4, then that says, whoa, boy, they really are backing off and putting the brakes on from the pituitary because we don't have a whole lot of thyroid stimulating hormone going in at all, and yet we still have normal thyroid. So there's something wrong with the thyroid itself in either one of those cases. So you hear people say, well, they checked my TSH and it was high, but they said my thyroid was low. Yes. And that's simply because the TSH, that thyroid stimulating hormone, is the foot on the gas pedal to the thyroid. Okay? So if it is high, that means we're shoving down on the gas with our foot, mm-hmm. and we're getting more stimulus to the thyroid than we normally would. If the TSH is low, then that means we're backing off on that stimulus to the thyroid, and the thyroid then is pumping out less, or it is actually, in this case, then pumping out too much. Okay? So that thyroid hormone, that T3 and T4, is what goes out and causes all these effects of hearts running fast, metabolism speeding up, slowing down, all that kind of stuff. So you can see that the thyroid really is a master gland, but it's controlled by a little bitty gland that tells it yes or no.
As we said, I think in other times, the body is truly amazing when
Yes.
you realize just how complicated and how one area can greatly affect another area. It's kind of like pain even. Sometimes you have pain, but it's not the problem. It's actually coming from, referred pain.
Yeah.
A pain here, but it's really coming from something else.
Right.
Well, what are some concerns about thyroid? Why should we be having this discussion?
Well, the thyroid, it as I say, it can have immediate effects upon somebody, but then it can have long-term effects too. As I say, since it affects a lot of different parts of the body, then metabolism being one of them, it can cause weight gain or weight loss, but it can also cause bone gain or bone loss. Okay, see, our skeleton in our bodies is not the skeleton you had when you were 19 years old, unless you're 19 now. Okay. It changes. We have cells in our body. One are called osteoblast, and the other one are called osteoclast. And one breaks down bone and the other one builds up bone. So we're continually remodeling ourselves, okay? And if the thyroid is running too fast, then you tend to break down more bone than you can build it back. Okay. And if it's running too slow, you can actually go the other route around. And when you start breaking down bone, then you get calcium levels that start to be elevated because that calcium from the bone's got to go somewhere. And so you have other issues that can be a problem too. Just as we talked about during Heart Month, if the thyroid is is putting out too much thyroid hormone, then the heart's going to run fast. And if the heart runs fast, then that can cause arrhythmias and problems with the heart. So, and if you have any kind of blockages around the heart, it can cause angina and things of that sort. So the thyroid is very important to keep under control. So let's say somebody comes in and they say, Doc, I just feel nervous all the time. I just feel jittery, jumpy. Well, they may check your thyroid. And if they find that you have a hyperactive thyroid, then the next question is, why is it hyperactive? Mm-hmm. You can actually, doctors will actually feel your neck sometimes when they're looking at your thyroid, and that's when they feel around your neck and they tell you to swallow, all right? Because it's surrounding the trachea and the esophagus right in there. And when you swallow, it moves up and down.
So it's right here?
It's right in here, right next to your goozle.
Okay.
Your Adam's apple, okay? So it's right in there. And when you swallow, it moves up and down, okay? And the doctor can feel that gland that move under his fingers. Sometimes you have little lumps and bumps in that thyroid. And those lumps and bumps can be either something we call a hot nodule or a cold nodule. Now, what that simply means is if we feel a lump or a bump in a thyroid, then we can do a test to see how much of this radioactive iodine it will take up, and we do x-rays. Mm-hmm. And if the iodine is taken up in those nodules, then that's called a hot nodule, okay? Because the thyroid needs iodine. All right? We'll get to that in just a second. So if you have a hot nodule, you may have an overproducing area in your thyroid, and it could be cancerous.
Okay.
So for that reason, you want to have that checked out. Usually something like a needle aspiration. A doctor or surgeon can do that. Can put a needle in there and take out some cells and look at it under a microscope, and we can tell whether or not it's something that needs to be taken out. So that is one thing that can cause hyperthyroidism. And then there are other diseases that pretty much just envelop the entire thyroid itself and make it overproductive. And if that's the case, then usually what we do there is we take out the entire thyroid. And then you can't, again, just like you can't live without a heart.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, can you live without a thyroid?
Well, you can, but you're going to have to replace that thyroid hormone. Okay?
Okay.
And we do have ways of doing that, and it's just a pill that you take every day. And we have to keep that adjusted so that everything stays where it should be. But yes, you can replace the hormone that the thyroid puts out.
So if you have either hyper or hypothyroidism, medication will help balance that?
Yes. If you have hypothyroidism, then we give you thyroid hormone.
Okay.
If you have hyperthyroidism and you take out your thyroid, you go from hyper to hypo in a big time because you don't have the thyroid anymore, and so we give you thyroid hormone. If you have hyperthyroidism, and we may try to give you some medications to calm the thyroid down. And if we do that, then there are some medications to work there. But usually you wind up with a surgical situation where you wind up taking it out.
So if it's hyper, it's more likely that a surgical situation as opposed to medication.
Could very well be, yeah.
Okay.
And you know, the other things you have to worry about too, if in a hyperthyroid situation, is, like I say, the heart will run fast. And so we may have to give you medicines to slow your heart down.
Okay.
So those are called beta blockers, and so we do use those to help slow the heart rate down. But we find that once you remove that hyper you become hypo, and then we deal with that on a separate issue.
So yeah, that sounds like you said. The body is very complicated.
It is.
Hold that thought. We'll be right back with GHC Coffee Break. Get your coffee.
Getting closer to nature can get you closer to your family. Go to discovertheforest.org.
Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. Joining me today is Dr. Reeves, and this time we're talking about the thyroid. As I said, thank you for the Thyroid 101. And you know, I think what I was feeling up here is probably our nodes or lymph.
Yeah,
lymph
right under here you'll
glands.
feel salivary glands and some lymph nodes. Right
Okay,
up
and
here.
then the
And
thyroid
then
is
the
gonna be
thyroid is a little bit down lower around your Adam's apple.
I think the body's interesting, and
Oh,
I mean,
it's amazing.
I even took a human anatomy physiology class. It's been too long now because I don't remember everything anymore. I did know though before you said pituitary gland, I was in my head going pituitary gland. Darn, I couldn't show off how smart I was.
There you go.
But I think, you know, for the average person, and that's what we hope this show reaches, is to really help people understand their body better.
Sure.
I think that the thyroid is people kind of get the heart attack. I think thyroid may be one of those that are a little bit less, are more elusive of
I agree.
subjects.
Yeah, I agree. But you'll find there's a lot of people who have to take some sort of medication for the thyroid. And hopefully they know about it. But yeah, other folks may not know quite as much. Do you know why there's iodine in salt?
No.
Because of your thyroid.
Oh.
Yeah. Iodine is one of those things that's needed for the thyroid to make its hormone. Okay? So we found that when, in the early days of our country, people who moved more inland didn't get the same kind of salts that we did everywhere else, and they didn't get the nourishment that included the iodine. So the decision was made to put iodine in salt. And so iodized salt is basically the plain table salt that you get everywhere else, nowadays. And that has iodine in it, and that solved a lot of thyroid problems that were going on back at the turn of the century before this one. So, yeah, that was the reason why there's iodine in salt. You may have, we don't see that much anymore, but you may remember goiters. Goiters are a swelling of the thyroid gland.
Okay.
So that again goes back to why we do now have iodine in salt. So these all, you may not have known that. Maybe a little bit of trivia for you next time you're trying Trivial Pursuit. We do have iodine in salt because we need it to keep a healthy thyroid.
Because I crave salt. I mean, literally, I will shake salt and eat it like it's a piece of candy. I know that's horrible. I shouldn't tell a doctor that. But my blood pressure's good.
Okay, good.
And it's really funny because my husband, when my lab works were done the last time, I said, my sodium is fine. And he said, well, as much salt as you eat? And I said, hey, I don't know maybe that's why I crave it, is because my sodium is it's normal or below. And my thyroid is great. I don't know. But I do crave salt and love salt a lot. But
well, salt is one of those things. Sodium chloride is what's in salt. But then there's also potassium chloride, which is usually marketed as light salt. And
okay.
When people say, I can't use salt, I use light salt. Well, it's usually potassium chloride. Okay. So you still got, that all you chemists out there understand that. So, but yeah, you still have that in there. the thing about salt is that the reason why we don't want people with high blood pressure to take salt or eat a lot of salt is because it tends to make your body retain fluid. Yeah. And so that fluid then can be a problem for someone who has heart failure or kidney problems or things along that line. So that's why we try to try to get people to not take in quite as much salt.
And say, of course, I'm grabbing, I guess it's like anybody else with an addiction, I'm grabbing for any thread of, see, it's okay for me to eat salt like it's candy.
My general rule is everything in moderation, okay? You don't want to overdo anything. Oh, you get enough every day, believe me. Americans get more salt than they probably need.
I'm sure. But going back to the thyroid and looking at, are people with either hyper or hypo more cold-natured, hot-natured?
Well, that is one of the things that we do ask when we're talking to someone about that. We say, do hot or cold temperatures bother you? And it can be that, obviously, if you're hyperthyroid, your metabolism speeds up. So when your metabolism speeds up, hot temperatures may be more of an issue for you because you're already hot, okay? Likewise, if cold temperatures bother you more than just being wintertime and cold, then that may be an indication that you've got a slow or low-acting thyroid. Now, earlier I talked about the TSH and the T3s and T4s. TSH is the thyroid stimulating hormone, and the T3 and T4 are the hormone itself that comes from the thyroid. So you've got a messenger hormone coming to the thyroid, and then you've got the thyroid that puts out its hormones for everything else. So if you look at that and you say, gee, my TSH is high, but my T3 and T4 are okay, then that means the thyroid is compensating, but it's having to work extra to put out the same amount of hormone, okay? And in cases like that, we call that subclinical hypothyroid, okay? So that means you're still keeping up with it, but it's taking extra effort.
Okay.
So if someone is not having any of the symptoms, but yet we find a moderately elevated TSH, then we call that subclinical hypothyroid. And in that case, it may be that we just need to supplement that particular patient with some thyroid hormones that you take by mouth, take a pill every day, that then helps bring that back into balance. Because we don't really want these things to be out of balance because it has other side effects, Likewise, if the TSH is low and the T3, T4 is normal, then we want to figure out why the TSH is low, and yet things are still normal. Because normally, if the thyroid is not the problem and the TSH is low, then the T3 and T4 would be low too, because the thyroid's not being told to put out more, so it's not going to put out more. If the TSH is high and the T3 and T4 are high, then that tells us the thyroid is responding accurately because it's putting out more when it's being told to do more. So in those cases, then we've got a problem that's not with the thyroid, but it's somewhere else. And it may be that pituitary that we talked about earlier, okay? The pituitary is that little master gland at the bottom of the brain, little base of the brain thing. It not only monitors thyroid, it monitors everything else.
The big brain.
Yeah. Well, it monitors your the steroids in your body. It monitors your estrogen, your testosterone, all that sort of thing too. So, in monitoring all of that, it does a lot. And there's actually some situations where the pituitary may have a little growth on it. And if that's the case, then it may be causing the thyroid to overreact, or it may cause the estrogen levels to be out of whack. It can cause a lot of different issues. So if the pituitary is not, if it's hyper, then it may be hyper in only one way or the other. It may just be hyper in thyroid, or it may just be hyper in estrogen, or whatever, because you can have little cancerous growths in the pituitary. And then there's another situation where And we see this a lot. Well, used to see it. We don't see it as much anymore because we sort of avoid this situation now. But it used to be that when women had a child, they may lose a lot of blood. Mm-hmm. And if they lose a lot of blood, then they become very anemic, and the pituitary, which sits there and blood rushes by it all the time, may not get the blood it needs. Oh. And that's then pituitary can die. And in that case, you got to supplement everything.
It's kind of like your mainframe just died.
Yeah. So we have to take care of that. That's called an empty cella syndrome. So, I know, I ramble on and on.
No. And I'm sitting here going, just like soaking it in, and I hope everybody else is enjoying this as much as I am. I do shows for me. No, I'm just kidding. But I do feel like if it's something that I would benefit, then others would as well. And I'm just really fascinated. I understood a little bit, I think, about the pituitary gland. I had no idea just how important that is and what it does and how it affects not only the thyroid, which it does sound like a major part of it, but it also just
affects everything.
Basically, like I said, for those techie folk out there, the mainframe.
Well, if you have questions about your thyroid, check with your doctor. It's easily to be checked, okay? You can have a quick little blood test and a little exam in your neck, and they can tell you how your thyroid's doing.
We only have a couple of minutes left of the show, but what would you tell me and our audience the most important things about having your thyroid checked and things that we should be looking out for, I guess?
Well, for the thyroid itself, if you have any questions, if you feel like you have heat or cold intolerance, if you feel like you're more tired than you should be, or you're hyperactive, I guess, you're gaining or losing weight, notice a change in your skin texture or hair gain or hair loss, most likely, then check with your doctor and have your thyroid checked out. Like I said, it's pretty easily done. It's a blood test and a quick physical exam. And you can find out whether your thyroid's acting right or not.
Yeah, I think that was one reason why I chose when I was looking at the different awareness type situations for February, is that I think there's more people that know less about, or maybe it's just because I know less about the thyroid. I'm assuming that other people know less as well.
Well, I think you're right.
So, all right, get your coffee. We'll be right back with GHC Coffee Break. Welcome back to GHC Coffee Break. One of the things that I have really enjoyed about February being a couple of really major health issues, of course the heart and now the thyroid, it really does teach me as well. I think the more we are aware of our bodies and the pituitary gland, the hypothalamus, and I understand that's like a topic this long and longer.
Oh, we can talk forever.
But I think bottom line is what we want everybody to get out of our GHC Coffee Break this month is health and heart health, thyroid health, and making sure you go to the doctor and finding the doctor that you need. Until next time on GHC Coffee Break, enjoy your coffee.